Dear sewing friends, I'm really happy to see you here and welcome to the Serger series. Now here we're going to explore 5 simple Serger techniques. We're going to talk about how to set them up, how to problem solve them, which is really important, and of course where to use them in your day-to-day sewing. And I truly hope that will give you more opportunity to enjoy and to really explore the full potential of your serger and have some fun in the meantime. But any type of exploration like that usually starts with basic skills and basic knowledge, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. So grab the serger that you have and grab the manual for it, and let's get going. Now here's a quick tip. If you don't have the manual for your serger, perhaps you have misplaced it, then you can find one online, usually on your manufacturer's website. They have these for free, so you can download it, print it out, or use it in a digital form. Let's begin with the moving parts of your serger. So if I turn it on, right here you will see that mine has 2 needles, the left needle and the right needle. The 2 cones that will thread those needles are usually right behind them. Now you will see in the process of this series that some techniques might require only 1 needle. Therefore, you can actually take them out. You can leave in the left needle or the right needle depending on that technique. Now right below the needles we will find a presser foot, and just like in our sewing machines, most modern sergers can actually switch out different presser feet. That's why it's really important to definitely peruse your serger manual, because oftentimes it will tell you what kind of presser feet are available for your make and model and what kind of are included with your purchase. And to switch out the presser foot, it's really easy. Right here in the back there's a little black button. If you press on it, it will drop the presser foot, so that way you can switch it out for whichever one you need. Next, right underneath the presser foot, there are 2 really important parts, and I'm going to open up the front panel so that way you can see a little bit better. And those are the knife and the stitch finger. Now the knife is there to create that really nice and even edge as you serge your fabric, which is really important. In most models you can actually disengage it. Sometimes you will see a button on the side of the serger to do that. Sometimes it is a manual thing, like in my serger. Now here's a fun and not so fun fact about a serger knife. I actually many years ago managed to break a serger knife. Don't ask me how that happened. I actually don't even know how exactly that happened. And at first it felt really scary. I thought that's it. That's the end of my serger. But I did find a replacement knife. I ordered it and then I replaced it myself. There's a little screw which helps you to do that, and ta-da! The serger was back in action. The stitch finger here is on the side and right underneath the presser foot, so it's a little bit hard to see it no matter how I try to get there with the camera, but it is a really important part because it does act like a knitting needle, and part of the loops are being formed on it as you serge your fabric. Now it is removable, so for me it's as easy as sliding it out and sliding it back in. For you it might be a different process, but you will see that for certain techniques, in order to achieve them, you actually have to take your stitch finger out to unbalance it, like for example for a rolled hem. Here you will also see the steps for threading the upper looper and the lower looper. And in my particular serger, on the inside of the front panel, we have a little spot for the sort of like a screwdriver that you will need in order to either replace or remove your needles. Also a little box of replacement serger needles, and a little spot if you decide to remove your stitch finger. You can place it right over here, so that way you don't lose it. I also have a little spot for tweezers that are really great for threading, especially some of the smaller, more tucked away parts here for the loopers. Now with that, I would encourage you to take a scrap piece of fabric and do 1 pass through your serger. And as you do that, just take your time to observe what each one of these elements does and how do they interact together. And I think that in a lot of cases that will take the fear out of serging, of which I hear quite a lot in the comments underneath the videos. So I think that will truly help just to sort of understand how each one of the details make the entire process. All right, let's talk about the knobs. And I call them knobs because that's what they look like on my serger. I have 1 over here and 2 right over here. But on your serger, they might look like little dials. You might also have a digital screen, so definitely double check. But regardless of that, we have 3 additional functions that we can adjust. And that is stitch width right over here on my serger, stitch length right over here, and differential feed. Let's start with differential feed. It's responsible for how evenly or unevenly these two feed dogs are going to move the fabric through the serger. Now on my particular serger, you can set it up to 2, which is going to gather the fabric as you serge. You can set it up to 1, which is the regular serging, and you can also set it up to 0.7, which is going to stretch the fabric as you serge. Next we have stitch length. My serger has the settings of 4, 3, 2 and R, which is for rolled, and you can see that number 3 here is marked in black, and that's for your regular standard serging. Now it even has here a little sort of symbol that will tell you what it does, the same as it did on differential feed, which is really helpful. Now this third knob on my serger is responsible for stitch width, and if I open the front panel and then turn my knob, which goes from 5 to 6 to 7, you can see how this entire metal part is moving to the side, which is going to make your stitch width wider. While we're here, you can also see that I have actually labeled my knobs, and I did it quite some time ago, probably a few years now, which is really helpful. So whether you are a beginner at serging or you are experienced, I still would suggest this as a really helpful thing to do. And same goes for threading. When it comes to threading, I feel that personally for me, there's no quick fix for it. You just have to do it. And the more you do it, the more confident you become, the more efficient you become. Also do that with the manual, so that way you know exactly what goes where. And then label the sequence of threading, so that way next time you don't have to have the manual. You know what goes first and what goes second and so forth. Now there is one hack that people absolutely swear by, but it has never worked for me. I find it really cumbersome, and it's just a lot easier and faster for me to rethread the serger instead of doing this hack, but perhaps you might find it useful. So what people say is that whenever you're just about to change the thread, cut the thread right over here and don't pull it out from underneath your presser foot. Take out all of the cones, replace them with new sets of colors, and then tie them in knots over here, and so that way you create a continuous thread from one color to another, and then pull it through until the entire serger now is threaded with a new color of thread. As I mentioned, it has never really worked for me, but if you need a visual, I'm sure that you can find a YouTube video somewhere on how to do this hack. But I do have another piece of advice when it comes to threading, especially if you have exactly the same make and model as I do. Right here on this wheel, there's a little plastic mark, and then on the serger itself, there's a little black mark. Now, if you align them, this is going to be the optimal position of the loopers and of the needles that you will need in order to successfully thread your serger. When you are ready to thread, especially if you just got your serger and you're excited to see what it can do, I would suggest threading each of the needles and each of the loopers with a different color thread. But I also often do this when I need to problem solve or troubleshoot a setting, because this helps me clearly see which of the threads is pulling and what needs to be fixed, especially when I do my test pass on a scrap piece of fabric. When it comes to thread, a lot of times I'm being asked, what thread are you supposed to use in your serger? And for most of my sewing projects, I use just a regular polyester serger thread. Sherlock or Maxi Lock, those are really readily available pretty much everywhere, but there are specialty threads that you can use in your serger, even some decorative ones to play around with it. Most of the times they will go into the upper looper because it has the biggest clearance, and that's the one that you will see most prominently. But other than that, in most of my sewing projects that you see in my videos, I use just a regular polyester thread. Now, to thread your serger, you will need to follow the steps that are outlined in your serger manual, but for this particular one, we're going to thread from right to left, from lower looper all the way to the left needle. First, turn off your machine and take your foot off the pedal. The threading starts with lifting up your presser foot, which will also open the tension discs, just like on your sewing machine. Then we go right here, and then following the color-coded marks that my serger has. Some sergers right over here might have a little button that will help you open up those tension discs as you thread it. So this is me threading my serger, and I did time it so that way I can tell you that it took just about 2 minutes at a normal pace to thread my serger, and it's not a big deal at all. Definitely don't be scared of it. As I always say, that if I can do it, then you can do it as well. It's just part of the process, and the more you do it, the faster and more confident you're gonna get at it. So definitely use your manual in order to thread it. Don't be scared, and you'll definitely succeed. To start serging, lower the presser foot, put your foot on the pedal, and let's go ahead and create a little bit of a tail. An interesting thing about a serger is that you can create this thread chain even without any fabric being underneath the presser foot, and it's not going to jam, which is very much not the same case when we're working with a sewing machine. Now let's grab our scrap piece of fabric, lift up our presser foot, place the fabric right underneath, lower the presser foot, and start serging. Here you can see all of the elements that we talked about previously coming together. The knife, the needles, the loopers, all of them working hard to create a beautiful serger seam. Once you have reached the edge, let's go ahead and create a little bit of a tail again. And then snip it off. Now it is really important for your serger seam to be balanced and for all the stitches to be in their place, not too tight and not too loose. And that's where the tension controls come in play. Both needles and the loopers have a little dial, which is responsible for the thread tension. Now, let's say I'm sewing with regular jersey knits, the ones that you would use in like a t-shirt or a long sleeve shirt. Then in majority of the cases, my tension would be set on all fours, or sometimes lower looper I will pump up to number 5. So if you want to increase the tension, make it tighter, you will go up, so 6, 7, 8, 9. If you want a looser tension, then of course you're going to decrease the number. For the sake of hands-on experiment, let's unbalance the tension. Let's do something like that and run it through the serger, and we'll see the result. The threads are all over the place. The left needle thread broke off entirely, and you can see that it looks nothing like it should, as we did in the first example. To secure your serger ends, you can do a couple of things. First, you can use a little latch hook and pull it through, just like you see me do on the screen. Next, you can part the threads of your serger ends and separate them into twos, and then tie a knot. Those are the two that I usually use the most, but there are 2 other methods that aren't as frequent in my day-to-day sewing, but they can come in handy. One of them would be, as you're serging, serge all the way to the bottom, then lift up the presser foot, go ahead, take your project and flip it upside down, then place it back underneath the needles, and go ahead and serge it, and then pull it a little bit to the side. After that, snip it off. And this is what you're going to have. The last method would be to simply snip off the serger tail and then use a little bit of fray check or fabric glue to glue it in place. Lastly, on my serger, I have 2 extra functions that I don't really use that often, but I would like to show them to you. The first one is this little knob over here. That is responsible for presser foot pressure. Most often, this adjustment is only needed when I sew really heavyweight fabric or really lightweight ones. The other function that I don't use that often is this little slidable piece, similar to the ones that we have on a sewing machine, and I don't really use it simply because it's just not small or narrow enough for me to be able to insert a sleeve. And for pant legs, usually my pant legs are wide enough, so I don't actually need to use this, but your serger might actually have a really functional one, so definitely check it. Now let's talk about the maintenance of your sewing, and here I have 3 main points. Now I just did about 2 samples on the blue fabric, and even though it doesn't seem like much, it already gathered quite a lot of fuzz on the outside and the inside of your serger. Usually I use a really big paintbrush in order to clean everything out. Next we have oiling, and here I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I will refer you to your serger manual, and the reason why I do that is because, for example, I actually have two sergers, both Borther sergers, and the sequence of threading there is different. On this one, we start with the lower looper. On the other one, we start with the upper looper. So every serger is different, but I do find that usually in serger manuals, it will clearly pinpoint what are the areas that you need to oil and how often. And then of course we have the needles. Needles on my sergers tend to bend after quite some time of serging, and that can cause skipped stitches, uneven serger seam, and a lot of other different problems. So definitely watch for that. I would say that I change my serger needles a little bit less often than I do on my sewing machine. Probably not the best sort of practice to inherit, but you do need to change them quite often, and change them depending on what fabrics you're working with knits or with woven, since on serger you can work with both. I truly hope that I will have the pleasure of seeing you in my future serger series videos. You can click on the one right over here. It's about how to do a rolled hem step by step, and I really hope that this video helped you not only understand all the moving parts of the serger, but also not to be scared of it and enjoy it next time you serge. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy, thoughtful sewing. Bye!